Welcome back, boys and girls. You know what time it is. It's time for another Q&A video session where I take questions from the members of the Obnoxious Brutes forum. So let's get right into it. We've got questions from GD585, Steph099, Major Tendonitis, and LA Hipster 1. GD585, let me tell you something. I have tried to answer your question now. I've started this video. This is maybe the fifth time. And I didn't like the way my answers were coming out, so hopefully I can get it right this time. Public schools, all the stuff that goes on in public schools. How would let me answer it this way. If I was putting my kids in school now, would I put them in a public school or a private school? My youngest is now, she'll be 22 here very soon. My oldest is a teacher himself in public schools, and he'll be 28 this year. But even when they were younger, you know, my wife and I, when they were real little, we couldn't have afforded to put them all in private school, even though I recognized even then that the academic outcomes for private schools were higher than they are for public schools. And there's reasons for that. You know, I know people, I work with people who would make the argument that a major chunk of that is because private schools have the ability to either accept or not accept students based on their own criteria, and that could mean that they don't accept certain special education students because they're not equipped to deal with that or whatever. But that does affect their academic outcomes. That can affect their standardized test scores. That can affect their graduation rates, their college acceptance rates, things like that, and essentially improve that is what I'm getting at. So anyway, but even if I could go back in time, if I could go back in time and had the same amount of money that my wife and I have or make now, would I put them in private schools? Yeah, I think I would. I think after my years spent in public schools, I think it's probably safer. And I know people who who work with me who have put their kids in private schools. So I think I think that would make sense for me and my wife today to put them in if we were starting over, to have our kids in private schools for the academic outcomes alone. What's the worst injuries that I've suffered lifting weights? One time I was doing an overhead press, and now I've never done anything crazy. I've seen people do some awful things. I've seen awful videos, and I try to avoid it because I have a weak stomach for injuries like that. And it's funny because I love MMA and I love sports like powerlifting and strength sports, but I cannot stand seeing a broken bone or anything like that. I just can't do it. But luckily I've never done anything quite like that. But the worst injury I've ever suffered lifting, I can think of a couple off the top of my head. One was I was doing an overhead press. I was pretty strong on strict overhead presses back then. This is close to 15 years ago. And back then my PR for a strict overhead press was 235. And I was doing, things like 185 for a set of 6, 185 for a set of 8, maybe 205 for a set of 3, things like that. Well, I was doing one of those rep sets. It wasn't a PR attempt or anything, but I was doing reps, and I remember I had the headphone back then. We had headphones with the little things running to your phone in your pocket or whatever. But I had the music just blasting in my ears, and I could feel and hear as I went overhead. I don't know if it was scar tissue or if it was the muscle belly or what it was, but I could hear it over the music. It was like construction paper just ripping, just 3 or 4 pages of construction paper ripping. That's what it felt like and what it sounded like. I couldn't put a hoodie on for weeks. I couldn't, I had lots of pain there, obviously. So I think I probably tore the muscle belly, and it was in the pec, not in the shoulder. I've got lots of little aches and pains, from knees to hip to shoulders to elbows, tendonitis, things like that. But that's one major, I guess you could say, one major injury that I had. Another was in my low back at the last powerlifting meet that I competed in, November the 1st, 2014. So almost 12 years ago now. I PR'd at that meet. I squatted 560 that day, benched 370, and deadlifted 570. So 1,500 total. And my prior total before that, I believe it was 1,450 55 before that, maybe. So it was a 45-pound PR that day. But after one of my squats, I think it was my first squat of the day. I don't even think it was my top squat. I probably did, the way that I would set things up back then is I probably squatted 500, 535, and 560 that day, or maybe 500, 525, 560, something like that. On one of those three, I felt in my low back, and the reason I have to describe it to you guys the way that I'm describing the chest thing and the low back thing is because your boy doesn't go to the doctor for things like this. I felt, in the best way that I can think to describe it, and I always think of this, imagine taking a glass of clear water and pouring like acrylic paint or I don't know, some sort of paint, maybe not acrylic paint, but some sort of paint in there, and watching the maybe it would be a watercolor paint, I don't know. Watching the color wash across the water. That's what it felt like in my low back. And so I think maybe I damaged a disc or something, because I could feel the pain, or I could feel first off, I felt like a cloud wash across my low back from left to right. And then it was sore and it hurt for weeks after that. And I still have a little ache and pain here and there from that. But that pain lasted for months. Who knows what I did to a disc down there? Who knows? Not good. But those are probably the worst injuries that I've had. And I've been fortunate enough to any kind of injury that I have where I tweak a shoulder, tweak a elbow, have tendonitis, hurt my low back, my hip, sore, stuff like that. I've always been able to kind of work around it and maybe change my grips or change the way I'm doing the exercise, change something so that I can still train pain-free. That's one thing that my friend Wade Johnson, great powerlifter and great powerlifting coach, always kind of told people is find a way to train pain-free. Just find a way to train around it. Find a way to train where you're not hurting or making the pain worse. And that makes sense to me. GD585 says, how do I stay positive? I think that's a characteristic. One time I made a joke on the forum about the 5 factor personality model: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And I said that there had been one added to the 5 factors, which was S for skipping leg day. But really, I think that, if you think about positivity and negativity, I think I'm an example of people on our little community, our little forum, of people who I'm an example of positivity. I might not be, Gandhi in terms of my projection of positivity out into the world, but I'm a teacher. I'm a pretty positive guy. I think you almost have to be optimistic and positive to be a teacher. So I think it's partially, in college, in sociology class and psychology class, they're always talking about nature versus nurture, and how much of that is something that's built into you and how much of that is what you were raised with. Probably some combination of both. I wish I could give you advice on how to be more positive. I had 20 years or longer to teach that to my kids, and I believe that 2 out of my 3 kids are generally very positive like me, and maybe the third will figure it out too. I wish I could give you advice on how to do it. Practice being positive. Like I said, I had so many years to model that type of behavior for my kids. So to tell you how to do it, maybe you'll just have to practice or find yourself a mentor. I don't know. That sounds corny, and maybe it is. And GD585 is building a home gym. Wanted to ask how much did I spend on mine. Off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to tell you for sure, but I can tell you that power rack over there probably, once it's all the attachments and everything that I got for it, who knows, probably could have cost $1,000. We're talking a lot of this stuff I bought years and years ago. I've got this hack squat machine over here, and I think I paid about $1,000 for that. Love that hack. It's hack squat and leg press dual. I've got all those dumbbells over there. And that you probably end up paying $1 a pound for those dumbbells, and I've got hundreds and hundreds of pounds of dumbbells and kettlebells. Let's say that's another $1,000. all the weights that I've got. I remember I always try to buy things on a relative sale when I can, but that doesn't always. Sometimes you need something and you go out and buy it. All the barbells and stuff. Let's put it like this. I've got this lat tower that I use all the time. That was probably $500. I've got this belt squat here beside me. That's $1,000 or maybe $1,100. The leg extension and leg curl, I bought that from a local high school, and that was maybe only a couple $100. And that's one of the best pieces of equipment I have. The dip machine that I'm sitting in right now, probably a couple $100. If you add up everything, including all the weights, because I bought a competition bumper plate set, I don't even know, 700 or 800 pounds worth of it. And I have a regular Cerberus metal iron plates, all hundreds and hundreds of pounds of those too. All this cost as much as an inexpensive car, which an inexpensive car in 2026 is probably, I don't know, probably $30,000. That might be a little high, it might be a little low. I suspect it's probably pretty close. Good luck on your home gym. I want to see pictures and video when you get it done. I want to see how it turns out. Stefo99 wants to know about mistakes that I've made in lifting, diet, and lifestyle. Mistakes that I made, in one video, one Q&A session, somebody asked me if I'm the type of person who has regrets in life, or if I think that, generally speaking, if I'm pretty happy with my decisions. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be here where I'm at right now had I not, I'm a product of my mistakes, just like I'm a product of the things that I did right. I'd like to think that I did more right than I have done wrong, but I made plenty of mistakes too. Now, in terms of lifting, I was never an elite lifter. I was never one of these great power lifters that, even had an elite total. I just didn't. I told you before, I was 300 plus pounds and totaled 1,500. I'm happy with that. I felt good about that. I'm proud of that PR, that 1,500 PR. I had to work for it. It was difficult for me, and I got there. I spent 5 or 6 years of my life really pushing the weights and trying to get stronger, and that's where I got. Now, I got a whole lot fatter too, obviously. That's a mistake. You could argue that allowing myself to get so fat was a mistake, certainly a physical mistake. I'm sure it took some toll on my health. I mean, here I am now. I'm okay now, but who knows? Mistakes in terms of lifting. I hopped around programs a little bit, in part because I told somebody the other day, I basically worshiped at the altar of Jim Wendler's 531 program. I really believe in those percentages and how he arrived at those percentages, and especially when you compare them to some of the percentages like Prilepin's chart, and how Prilepin used so many thousands of Russian athletes to arrive at some of those percentages. I really believe that working in those rep ranges at those percentages was effective for improving strength, and it really worked for me too. I improved my strength from squatting 405 and deadlifting 405 to squatting 560 in a meet and deadlifting 570 in a meet. I went from benching 275 to benching 370. Over the course of 5 or 6 or 7 years, again, I gained a lot of weight in the process. But yes, I did those percentages for the vast majority of those years, but also I would go periods of time where I would go over to my friend Wade Johnson's, and he had a different system. He followed something more like a linear periodization, and I would flip-flop back and forth, and I would go several weeks doing a Wendler type thing, then I would do a few weeks of doing a Wade Johnson type thing. I would, if I could go back and make a change to the way that I did that back then, I probably would have made more progress if I had just trusted my gut and done one over the other. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I believe that there's more than one way to skin a cat, and you could use linear periodization. You could use like a 531 wave model. There's lots of different ways that you could do things. Diet, I think that should be fairly obvious. If I could go back and just, and just understand or figure out what I figured out about myself 3 years ago, which is that I have the power to control what I put in my mouth, what I eat, and what I put in my body, I have the power to control that. And sometime around 30, I stopped using tobacco. So you know what? Maybe the biggest mistake ever was using smokeless tobacco when I think I took my first, here in the South we call it dip, but I took my first dip when I was 15. And I quit when I was about 29 or 30, and that's when I just replaced the dip habit with a food habit, and the weight shot up. I mean, I gained 100 pounds in a year. I just replaced one bad habit for another. So really, if I could talk mistakes, probably that. If I could just go back and never do that, never initiate that first addiction. And I would probably do a better job. But my wife and I started having kids very young. I don't know if you have ever tried to do the math on. I'm 45. I'll be 46 here in a month. And when I talk about the ages of my kids, we started having kids very young. So I didn't go back to college and get all those degrees that I've talked about in these videos until I was about 35. Now I have all the degrees, and if I could go back and still do all the same stuff, my wife and I get married, have kids, and do all this stuff, but manage to figure out a way to do college earlier, again, maybe, who knows, maybe I would have. Maybe that wouldn't have worked out for me for whatever reason. Maybe I would have gotten a job that I hated and been miserable or something, and who knows. So, some of those things are just like, oh, I wish I had gone to college earlier, or I wish I had figured out the diet thing earlier, but then who knows, maybe I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So that's the best answer I have for that, Stepho99. Major Tendonitis wants to know if I have cheat days. No, I don't. I'm not capable of having cheat days, and I proved that. One of the things that I gleaned from gaining 200 pounds over a whatever 5, 6, 7, 8 year period is that I'm not the kind of person who can do cheat days and get back on track. A cheat day for me would ruin 3 weeks worth of 4 weeks worth of dieting. That's just, and I remember doing CKD diets and TKD diets and Dave Palumbo ketogenic diet where he gives you a cheat. Just the last meal of the day on Saturday, just eat whatever you want. Well, you can tell that to bodybuilders, and you can tell that to people who are very strict and who can control that. Maybe that means they go to In-N-Out and have a cheeseburger and fries, or 2 cheeseburgers and fries. You tell somebody that weighs 350 pounds who just squatted, 500 pounds for a set of 5 that morning, who's hungry, man, you tell me I can eat whatever I want as long as it's just after 6 o'clock on a Saturday night, I'll eat 20,000 calories. Trust me. It's not hyperbole. I will do that. So no, I don't have cheat days. Fasting, another thing, fasting to me encourages binging. I'm not saying it does for you, but I think fasting for me certainly would encourage binging. And I experimented with fasting. I remember reading books by a guy named Jason Fung, Dr. Jason Fung, a Canadian, I guess he's probably a metabolic doctor or something. I've got a couple of his books in my library. And I tried a few different things. But to me, that's just you go long enough without food and you go back into eating again. I don't know if you do 24, 48, 72 hour fast or whatever it is, go back into eating. Well, I'll just eat more than I missed out on for that 72 hours. Once the floodgates open, so I just have to keep the floodgates closed, basically. That's my job, is to keep the floodgates closed. And if I do that, I'm successful. Adherence. So I wrote down adherence versus performance because you were saying that you feel weak. You can stick to it. My problem would be with the fasting would be the binging once I came back out of it. But you're saying your problem is basically adherence and or would be performance versus adherence. Well, I think that's going to happen. I think any bodybuilder, anybody following a bodybuilding type lifestyle or routine who eats carbohydrates frequently throughout the day can feel the glycogen replenishment when they do it right. You can feel the energy to lift. You can feel the pump. that you get from the carbs, the fast digesting carbs when you're lifting weights, and you take that out, it's going to be tough, man. It's going to be tough to have optimal performance and pumps and energy and glycogen replenishment. Matter of fact, it's going to be impossible to have glycogen replenishment if you're fasting. So, I don't think it's ideal for performance, but if your goal is weight loss, I guess that would be the fastest way to do it, just to not eat. For the reasons I've already outlined, I just don't think it's probably the best way. But do you, man? If you can find a way to make it work for you, that's not the way that I do things, but see what you can make work. LA Hipster 1, always with the good questions. Thank you, LA Hipster 1. He asks, if my kids were young today, if my sons were young today, he says, would I be monitoring their internet usage? Let me tell you something. My kids are 28 and my oldest son's 28. My younger son, he was born in 2004, so he's 22 now, so he'll be 23 next year. I was monitoring their internet usage in 2012, or I don't know, whatever years they started having access to, iPhones and iPads and stuff like that. I was monitoring it then. I was, there's so much vile, even back then, man. You remember, I'm a misker. I'm an OG misker, 2002, February 18th, 2002. I know the disgusting and vile and awful stuff that's on the internet. I wanted to make sure that they weren't exposed to too much of that too early. So yeah, random checks on the phones, lots of rules. Was it perfect? They probably figured out ways around me. I have no doubt. My 22-year-old son jokes about it now, about how he had a spare. He would have, every time you get a new phone, the old phone ends up in a drawer, a junk drawer somewhere. And he used to joke that he had spares. He had a spare controller when he got grounded from his PlayStation back in the day or whatever. So, you get around stuff like that. But yeah, I monitored stuff like that. And is that embarrassing sometimes? Yeah. For them? Yeah. Did I care? No, I know how important that was and would be now. Those are my phones. Those aren't their phones. They're able to use those phones at my discretion. That's the way my wife and I saw it. That's the way we would see it today. He says, is there some magic formula for dieting essentially, or is it just a matter of just doing it? For me, it's not a magic formula, but and I'll get more into this as we talk about your another question that you have coming up. But basically, I have a calorie level that I'm trying to hit on a given basis, on a daily basis. And I eat a lot of protein because it kind of keeps me full. And there are times where I start to feel like a little drained, and then I'll kind of cut the protein down and drive the carbohydrates up. I do that kind of thing frequently. For me, it's not so much a formula. I like to eat frequently. I eat 6 meals a day, so I split, sometimes 7. I'll go, to me, as long as I'm hitting that relative calorie level that I'm trying to hit within the certain parameters and I'm eating enough protein, then I can play with it. I'll eat as many as 7 meals, and sometimes 90% of the time I'm eating 6 meals. But 7 meals, split them up and eat plenty of protein and the rest carbs. And there's a little bit of fat, but I eat very lean protein sources, so fats are pretty low in my diet. That's not a magic thing. Could you do that in 4 meals? Probably. Could you do it in 8 meals? Probably. It starts to become a thing where, you're just eating all day, but whatever works for you. Could you do it in 1 meal a day? I know some people do. Is that optimal for people lifting weights and trying to have good performance in the gym? I'm going to say no, probably not. What do I think about GLP-1s, essentially, was the question, I think. I used a very early version of a GLP-1 prior to my real weight loss that has stuck for me. Because I remember, I've told you guys before, I've gone up and down, up and down, up and down. Eventually, I was just all the way up, as high as you can go without dying, basically, is where I was at. And yeah, I used GLP-1s I used one called Saxenda back in the day. And it was a daily injection rather than a weekly injection. And yeah, I lost some weight, but then I gained it all back and more, just like I always did when I was relying on something external to help me lose the weight. You say that the GLP-1, I think you said in your question that it's cheating. I don't see it like that. Whatever it takes to get people, whatever people need to get them right, and to not die of a heart attack so that they can figure things out. It took me 10 years to figure out what was wrong with me. And I don't even know that I could still explain it now, but I figured it out. And it, again, took me 10 years. So whatever it takes to get people, keep people alive until they can figure it out. Now, is it a Band-Aid for most people? Probably, because what, are you going to take it for the next 40 years? I guess, maybe. Doesn't seem reasonable to me, but I don't know, maybe. At least it wasn't reasonable for me. I've told this to people before, but I remember sitting right there on those stairs, right over there. I was probably putting on knee sleeves or putting some sort of icy hot on my knees or something, talking to my training partner. And I told him, and it was October of 2023, so almost 3 years ago now. And I said, no more bullshit, no more pills, no more cream, or no more injections, no more, no more negotiating with myself, nothing. I've got to lose the weight for me. It's got to be something that I can do for the rest of my life, or else it's no good, because I'll just end up gaining it all back and more again. The cycle will continue. And that, from that day forward, from that moment forward, I have done it on my own. No GLP-1, no weight loss assistance for me. And I was probably 350 pounds when I told my friend that. And today I was 197.8. So I figured it out. He asked about a weekly caloric surplus versus, or a weekly caloric budget versus a daily caloric budget, which is an interesting thought. I mean, if you're trying to simplify things, and if you think of it in terms of, let's say you have a 3,000 calorie per day budget that you have, and you just make that a 21,000 calorie weekly budget. Well, according to all the people who say that diet is just an exercise in physics, an exercise in calories in versus calories out, which is essentially true. It's not essentially true, it just is true. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't see any reason why there would be any difference. You could do a yearly or a monthly caloric budget. The problem is, I think you start to lose a little bit of the nuance. And it's funny because I just made a post yesterday kind of quoting Mark Rippetoe, saying that complexity appeals to stupid people. I don't know, just to kind of troll people a little bit, because I know that Mark Rippetoe doesn't have the best reputation anymore like he used to. But I do think he's a smart guy, and I think he's interesting, and I think he says things that are compelling. And I think he's funny. He's a funny guy. Basically, it would make it more complex to think of things in terms of the day versus a year or a month or whatever. But I do think there are some nuances that you need to consider. It makes me think of Milo Sarcev, the bodybuilding IFBB pro, great physique from the 90s and 2000s, and now famous bodybuilding coach and whatever, podcaster, influencer, whatever. He breaks things down into segments of the day. Like he thinks of it in terms of your workout, as you've got fat burning parts of your day, you've got muscle building parts of your day, and you've got, maybe even another fat burning portion of the day later on. He breaks it up into segments of your day. Justin Harris, who is another bodybuilding, he famously made a movie called Super Heavyweight, I think it was called. It was a documentary film back in, I'm going to say 2007, 2006, him and Steve Kuklo, another an IFBB pro bodybuilder. Now, back then they were super heavyweights on the NPC circuit trying to make their way. They were squatting and deadlifting big weights, 600-700 pound plus for reps. And Justin Harris is now a popular bodybuilding coach, works with Brandon Curry and some other people. Anyway, he breaks things down by the week rather than the day or parts of the day. He looks at it like, okay, you can be in a caloric deficit for several days in a row, especially if it's from carbohydrates, deplete your glycogen levels, and then you can have what they call a high day in the bodybuilding world. I've got a ton of books over here, you can probably see, but some of those books over there are Chris Aceto's books, and he talks about having high days in there too, which is probably somewhat where Justin Harris got some of these ideas from. At least he has I think he said he has a master's degree in physics, so it's not like he's just taking it from Chris Aceto. I'm sure he's making it his own too. But if you deplete glycogen levels for a few days, and then you can super compensate those glycogen stores by having a super high carbohydrate day that's eating more than your caloric, what you would consider to be your caloric maintenance, well, then you can actually super compensate your glycogen levels in your muscle and in your liver. So if your liver and your muscles usually only hold 700 grams, let's say, well, maybe you can hold 900 or 1,000 grams of glycogen if you were depleted beforehand. So he looks at it, even through a slightly different prism, let's say, than daily or yearly or even parts of the day or whatever. Anyway, I think there's different ways to look at it. I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at it by the week. I do by the day. Let's see. Still with LA Hipster 1. He says, Donny2Yucky. Oh, he's binging and he's back on alcohol. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago. And you're wondering, what are you wondering? You want to know, why won't people take good advice? What's the matter with these people? They won't take any good advice. Let me ask you this. Now, I think he's probably being defensive about it. I've seen a few posts where he's like, oh, I'm down to 240. You can't tell me nothing. I've lost 50 pounds doing it my way. And I think at the time you might have asked me if I thought it was a good idea for him to have these big cheat days. And I said, for me, it wouldn't have been a good idea because I would have lost control of that. Even if I thought I was in control of it, even if I was defensive with somebody else about bringing it up with me, I might have known in the back of my mind that I couldn't control that. But like I said, it took me 10 years to finally get things under control and figure it out for myself. And maybe that's Donny2Yucky just hasn't hit that point yet. For me, I can say that I legitimately, back in those days when I was as high as 392 pounds, and I remember going to sleep, and I remember laying down to go to bed. Matter of fact, I would have to sit up and sleep. I was sitting straight up, but I would go to sleep afraid that I wouldn't be able to I wouldn't wake up in the morning. I'd die of a heart attack in my sleep. And that's basically, that is what, that was the trigger for me, that basically I knew that I had to do something. And maybe Donny2Yucky hasn't had that happen. I mean, in the world of drug addiction, they'd say, or alcoholism, they'll say, you hit rock bottom or whatever. You have to hit your absolute bottom before you can actually come up out of it. I mean, giving somebody unsolicited advice, I don't know that ever worked out for anybody. I mean, I wouldn't walk up to somebody and give them unsolicited gym advice. I see people doing it. I see people doing it on social media. Somebody posts a lift of a deadlift, or they post a bench press or something. Somebody comes in and says, well, if you retract your scapula and, rotate your elbow at the whatever, man, if somebody comes to me and asks me for advice, then it depends on how complicated the advice is. I've got somebody right now asking me to program their workouts for them, and no, unless this person offered to pay me, and I do train a couple of people for a little money, but I don't ask a ridiculous amount of money. But if I'm going to take my time and program their workouts and take them through workouts and stuff like that, I'm not going to just do it out of the kindness of my heart. This equipment costs me money too. But if somebody asks, listen, man, free advice is super easy to wad up and throw in the trash. But, advice that you have learned on your own through through hard times, that's the kind of advice that will cause change. Unfortunately, not a guy on the internet giving you free advice. Even if it's a smart guy like LA Hipster One giving you advice, it's probably not going to cause any change over the long term. Donny2Yucky is going to have to figure it out for himself, unfortunately. That's it for the questions. 35 minutes and 15 seconds. I don't know. This might be the last one. Or, yeah, I could possibly do one more next weekend because after that, your boy is going to be back at work. So anyway, good talking to you guys. Bye.